Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Valenzi, Executive Director with the Association of Arkansas Counties. We want to welcome you here today. We will have several speakers, and I'd like to turn over the mic first of all to the Arkansas State Drug Director, Kirk Lang. So please join me in welcoming Kirk.
Thank you, Chris. What a wonderful afternoon it is. And thank you all for being here. Nationally, in 2016, the opioid epidemic claimed more than 64,000 lives at a rate of 175 overdoses every day. National statistics tell us for every fatal overdose, there are 30 non-fatal overdoses. Every 19 minutes in the United States, a child is born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is an opiate withdrawal caused by the birth mother who is misusing opioids. Chances of survival 1 in 3. In Arkansas, more than 1,000 lives have been lost due to overdose between 2013 and 2016. In 2016 alone, a minimum of 401 lives were lost attributed to drug overdose, 355 of those to the opioids. In 2017, the death toll in Arkansas overdose deaths will exceed 401, as preliminary overdose rates are showing to be 30% higher than those in 2016. Costs to Arkansans have been in the millions of dollars and have devastated and eroded family structure throughout Arkansas. The opioid epidemic has attributed to the rising crime and reduced the quality of life for Arkansans. Arkansas struggles to provide treatment due to the cost and rural composition. The ability to afford and provide naloxone to reverse opioid overdose is just now becoming available to first responders in a desperate attempt to reverse the death rate. In 2016, Arkansas had the second highest prescribing rate in the United States at 114.6 painkiller prescriptions for every 100 people. The national average is 66.5. The prescribing rate attributed to over 235 million opioid pills to be distributed to Arkansans, a population of just over 3 million. The overprescribing and the misinformed prescribing is directly related to bad information provided by our prescribers about the safety of opioids themselves. The result is that Arkansans are very opioid dependent, a very opioid dependent population. It is a perfect storm for illicit drug cartels to supply a cheaper alternative to the prescription opioids of heroin and deadly fentanyl into a population that is starved for opioids. As we know it, 4 out of 5 heroin users started by misusing prescription drugs. This is our nation's third and worst opioid epidemic. The resolve for Arkansas will be in Arkansans coming together, and wow, have they. Coming together to educate themselves in the issues of this epidemic, holding contributors of this epidemic accountable, being willing to change and adapt new prescribing guidelines for the health and welfare of our state. I applaud these city and county and state leaders that are represented here today for being able to recognize this important issue and having the tenacity to do something about it. If we fail, we will be the first generation that has not left a better place for the next generation. It is so urgent that we stop the carnage, and together we can do just that. My pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director, Don Zimmer.
Thank you, Kirk. Kirk Lane is an Arkansas treasurer. We couldn't have a better person as the Arkansas Drug Director. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards, and he's doing a wonderful job. He needs some help. These guys standing behind us need some help. And that's what this is really all about, is trying to get them some help. I want to thank all of you all for coming, but particularly the public safety people, the first responders, to take time out and show the public how important this issue really is. A statistic that struck me the other day was given at the National League of Cities meeting, where they said that 84% of the world's opioid usage is in the United States, and we have only 3% of the world's population. So even with that large usage in the United States, Arkansas still ranks at the top, one of the heaviest prescribed states, as Kirk pointed out. So we're at the forefront of a national epidemic. So what we've got for you today is a project that started about 5 months ago over here at the County Association building. I got a letter from Chris Belines, and he said, come over and he'd like to have a meeting on opioids. And so I went that day. There were a lot of county officials in the room. There were a lot of state people. Kirk was there, people from the AG's office, other state people. And we talked about opioids and the tremendous toll it was taking on Arkansas's communities, families, individuals. And that afternoon, there was a number of lawyers that were there that Mike Rainwater has assembled, some great legal minds from Arkansas as well as Alabama. And so after the conclusion of talking about this all morning, we decided the best way to attack this problem was with a big lawsuit on behalf of as many as wanted to be a part of it. So we went back to our respective organizations. I met with our legal staff. They were very supportive. We met with our boards and others of our organization. Everybody was supportive of trying to do something about this crisis. So we got on board pretty quickly, and the counties did the same thing, and others did as well. And so the result of all of that is that a lawsuit has now been filed, was filed last Thursday, Crittenden County, on behalf of the state, the counties, and the cities. It alleges that the named defendants were major contributors to this crisis we have in Arkansas. So the theory of the case is that we're trying to get the people who created the problem to help finance the solutions to the problem, so that we don't have to come to the lawmakers out here in the state capitol or the courthouses or the city halls across the state and ask them to put up public funds to try to deal with this crisis. If this lawsuit is successful, the people that caused it will be helping to solve it. So that's underway, and we think we've got a unique situation because no other state has put everybody together like we've come together. And we've got almost all of the counties, over 86% of the municipal population represented by cities that want to be direct parties, as well as the state. So everybody in the state is represented in this case. So we're optimistic. We think it's going to be a great thing for Arkansas. It's going to reverse this terrible epidemic we got and get us on the right way. Our next speaker is going to be a guy who started this off, the guy who wrote me that letter back in October to get this underway, and that's Chris Belines. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, the director of the County Association, for a few more words. Chris?
First of all, I want to thank Don for the warm welcome, warm introduction. It has been a pleasure to work with you and with all of your team on this nationally unprecedented effort to unite cities and counties and to combat the opioid epidemic in court. And your leadership has been invaluable in the process. Additionally, to Arkansas Drug Director Kirk Lane, Governor Hutchinson could not have selected a better advocate for Arkansans and for all of our efforts with the drug take-back program, as well as arming our law enforcement first responders with the temporary opioid antidote naloxone. It has saved, between the two, it has saved countless lives in our state. We want to thank you for your tremendous service, Chief Lane. The public safety personnel in attendance see the opioid crisis firsthand. We thank you all for your courageous fight against what continues to be a plague in our lands. Today we stand together against the opioid epidemic. The United States experiences more than 42,000 fatal opioid overdoses per year. To put that in perspective, every month more people perish from fatal opioid overdoses than were killed in the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. The Centers for Disease Control tell us that from 2000 to 2016, more than 600,000 people died from drug overdoses. Let me repeat that number to you again. From 2000 to 2016, more than 600,000 people died from drug overdoses. This epidemic will soon eclipse the American death toll from World War II. Arkansas is taking the brunt of this problem hard. Each year we lose over 400 people in our state to fatal overdoses. This number has increased nearly 300% since 2000 and coincides with opioid sales quadrupling in Arkansas over the same period. This plague has had a powerful impact on our counties, our court system, our hospitals, our jails with overcrowding and with costs. It has had an impact on policing and law enforcement and on coroners, everybody associated with county government. The fallout from the prescription opioid epidemic has also spawned a public health and criminal justice crisis stemming from the increased use of heroin. Arkansas has seen the number of heroin-related hospitalizations increase more than 8-fold since 2011. Opioid users graduate from prescription pills to heroin because it is cheaper, readily available, and produces the same high. Unfortunately, addicts far too often graduate to the illicit drugs of heroin and fentanyl, and as this happens, we are seeing our death counts rise. We have a public health emergency here in Arkansas. It is time that we do more than just talk about it. It is time that we fix the issue. Though other lawsuits have been filed in federal courts across the country, Arkansas is the only state that has been united in this way. We know that by standing together in this litigation, we are a strong, unified front, and we will receive the means necessary to combat this crisis in Arkansas. I wish we had no need for this press conference. I wish we didn't have to face the grim reality that 175 people in our country who woke up to a sunrise this morning will be dead by tomorrow's sunrise because of a drug overdose. I wish certain pharmaceutical companies and distributors had not sacrificed lives for profit, as is alleged in the complaint. But according to the lawsuit, they did, and so we are here today. In closing, I wish the citizens of Arkansas could all witness firsthand the public servants who stand before us today, locking arms to remedy their collective local problems by acting together. And I want the people of our state to know that the public servants of Arkansas, her cities and her counties, do not stand idly by waiting for solutions to come from elsewhere. Instead, that we are taking bold and unique actions on behalf of the people that we serve. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the next speaker to the microphone. Little Rock Mayor Mark Stodola has been an incredible influence nationally while serving as president of the National League of Cities. As a precursor to being elected president, he served as a co-chair of the Joint National League of Cities and National Association of Counties Task Force on the Opioid Epidemic, and his leadership has produced materials to help educate the entire country on the problem that we now have. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Mark Stodola.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all of you for being here today as we talk about this epidemic that has plagued not only our state but our nation. There's been a lot of statistics that have been passed around, but the most important statistic has to do with our children. It has to do with the easy access that they have to prescription painkillers and what it means to the lack of their ability to see their own fulfillment and the productive nature of their lives. I know that we've got many community providers here and city leaders and county leaders here, but I want to speak about the parents and the grandparents of the children that we have who wind up getting addicted to these drugs that turns into the heroin on the streets. Arkansas ranks first in the nation for ages 12 through 17 in the misuse of painkillers, first in the nation. I know each of us has an experience. We have a family member, we have a friend who's not only addicted to it, but can't get off the drugs because they can't find the adequate treatment facilities to do such. We know people who have committed suicide, young people who committed suicide because of the desperation that they have as it relates to the inability to get off of these drugs. And unfortunately, it's because of the misrepresentations of the manufacturers of these opiate painkillers that leads us to have this lawsuit filed to begin with. And so, as was said, we need to do something about it. The most important thing I will tell you, and I mean, there's been many numbers said, but do you realize that we have 12 states in this country where the number of prescriptions written for painkillers exceeds the total population of their states? A phenomenal statistic in terms of the ability to have these things dispensed. Each day there are 3,900 people who initiate a non-medical opiate prescription use for the first time. Each day there are 580 people who use heroin for the first time. And each day there are at least 78 people who die from an opiate-related overdose. My friend Steve Williamson, the mayor of Huntington, West Virginia, and we've seen this, and I want to say this is not just an issue in urban America, it's an issue in rural America as well. And as you move into the Appalachians, they've got it even worse than we do. My friend Steve Williamson, on a Friday night, between Friday and Saturday, of course, of 24 hours, had 43 overdose responses for his public safety personnel. 43. A town of 45,000 people. So it gives you a sense of the urgency of what this is all about. And so I'm very proud that I was able to lead a joint task force on this about a year and a half ago when we identified this issue. For those of you who are local leaders, I want you to know that there's an action plan that we've published. It's called a Prescription for Action. A Prescription for Action, local leadership in ending opiate abuse. So above and beyond the issue of litigation, the real message here is what can we do about this epidemic? And so this calls out some various interesting, important things that we as local leaders can do. So not only can we lead in a crisis and set the tone and the conversation and open up people's minds to the fact that this is truly an epidemic, but we can focus on the issues of prevention and education in our schools and in our community houses. We can also make sure that we work very, very hard on the issue of making sure there are treatment facilities. And we can reassess the importance of public safety and law enforcement and recognize that not everything is going to be solved by virtue of a conviction and putting somebody in a jail that is inadequate to be able to deal with the addiction factors that are so present with these individuals. And so I urge you to reach out to me or reach out to the National Association of Counties or the National League of Cities to get a copy of this document, because you can help make a change in the nature of the addiction that we see on the streets of our communities. It's so very, very important. I'm very hopeful that the result of this litigation is going to be funding. It's going to be funding that can help us create more treatment centers so that people can figure out a way and finally find a way to get adequate treatment to get off of this terrible, terrible addictive drugs. I understand that as of yesterday, the administration has talked about $6 billion to be dedicated toward the issue of opiate abuse on a federal level. I hope that we see some real action out of Congress on that issue. I know there's discussion of even trying to double that amount to $13 billion. Certainly, it's good and high time that we know that our federal government has recognized that this is a crisis nationwide. More people dying than in some of our world wars. So again, it's up to us to take that action with or without this litigation. And I hope that you'll take the time to find the people in your community that can go ahead and take and make a prescription for action on ending the issue of opioid drug abuse in our communities. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He has seen firsthand the impacts of opioids on a county that's particularly hard hit, and can also testify to the fact that it is rural as well as urban that opioid affects. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff John Montgomery of Baxter County.
Good afternoon. It is a beautiful day. So proud to be here and proud that you all have joined us. You know, it's hard to find anyone who hasn't felt the effects of opioid addiction in one way or another, from friends, families, and even in themselves. This problem didn't happen overnight, and it knows no age limit, no gender, no race, or no socioeconomic barriers. As the opioid drug epidemic spreads, so does its impact on our law enforcement, our hospitals, our courts, our criminal justice systems, and our communities. Our city and county resources are stretched thin as we do our best in combating the opioid epidemic. Every one of my colleagues across this great state are having to deal with this crisis every single day. Our prisons and our jails are full. Good people are getting caught up in criminal activity after becoming addicted. I know I can speak for everyone when I say this crisis is tearing our communities apart. Being unopposed, I was just elected to my 8th term as Baxter County Sheriff. Baxter County is the northern part of the state. It's known for its beautiful rivers, its lakes, and all the natural beauties. It's home to many retirees and tourists all across this country. But unfortunately, we are not isolated from this opioid crisis either. Baxter County has the 5th highest drug overdose rate in the state from 2010 to 2014. Baxter County's opioid distribution score was the 7th highest of the 75 counties, and Baxter County was ranked 7th in the list of the top 20 counties for consideration in Arkansas as evaluated and determined in the 2017 Arkansas PDO Needs Assessment. We in Baxter County have seen an uptick in property crimes directly associated with those addicted trying to pay for their habit. And their addiction is so strong that they're turning to other cheaper but more dangerous means to satisfy their addiction. I began my law enforcement career more than 30 years ago, and I can tell you I've seen more heroin in the last 2 years than I've seen the other 28 combined in Baxter County. I want to personally praise all of these organizations for coming together to tackle this problem. It won't be easy, but through their tireless effort, Arkansas now has one voice approach, which I believe will set us apart from other litigations being filed and provide our state with the necessary resources she so desperately needs. Before I go, I want to tell you a story. Not a fairy tale, but a real life story that impacted a family that so many in our community know well. It's about a young woman that grew up in a good home, was very active in school, and whose family was active in the community. This young woman, who I'm going to call Jane out of respect for the family, became addicted. Her family tried to get her help, but she kept relapsing. Thefts from her friends and her family became commonplace, landing her in jail more than once. A marriage failed. Her child had to be placed with relatives. Due to the expensive treatment options each time Jane went to treatment, it was simply not long enough to shake her addiction. At one point, while executing a search warrant on the home of a known drug dealer, video was seized showing her and other young women performing acts just to get their next fix. Tragically, Jane ended up taking her own life. Now, this story about Jane is real, but there are many other Jane stories that I could stand up here and share. And I know everyone out there, both here present and those that are watching have their own Jane story. And I bet everyone could share heartache and tragedy that someone they know and care about has struggled with opioid addiction. So here's what I encourage you to do. I'm encouraging you to take your Jane story, write it down, mail it or email it to us. Let your Jane story help us help others across this state. Help us eventually save lives. The Center for Disease Control is now estimating that the national burden of prescription opioid misuse is $78.5 billion with a B a year, including costs of health care, lost productivity, and addiction treatment. While that number may seem large, it's simply not enough. It's going to take billions of dollars just in Arkansas alone to help stop this epidemic. It's our hope through this litigation strategy, we can extend our resources to not only fund current education, prevention, and treatment programs, but also develop new programs and strategies to help those that are addicted. We cannot continue down this path. Communities, families, and lives are at stake. Enough is enough. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Don Zimmerman.
Thanks, Sheriff. Our next speaker is another person who deals with this crisis on a daily basis at the local level. He is Police Chief Chad Henson from Truman. He is the immediate past president of the Arkansas Police Chiefs Association. Chad?
Thank you. I want to begin by saying that I have my Betty story. I have my Jill story. I have my Mr. Jones story. I have my Mr. Smith story, just like every one of you. Our community is inundated by these stories. The one takeaway I have from the sheriff's comments is that good people are getting caught up in this. The opioid epidemic is changing law enforcement across the country. In many communities, deaths from drug overdose have become an all too daily occurrence. In the past, we, law enforcement, have been the ones to go out and fight crime and put people in jail. Today, the men and women behind me are having to divert their time and money and combat the consequences that accompany addiction, including violence, petty crimes, and child neglect. With rising overdose rates, police often are the first responders to witness and intervene. We, law enforcement, are now actually administering a drug that will reverse the overdose and intervening before abuse turns fatal. In my community and in yours, it is an all too often occurrence to wake up and scroll through social media only to find a friend, a coworker, or another celebrity has died from an overdose on prescription pills. I have seen the faces of these families at the funerals, the despair of the co-workers trying to reconnect at work, and all the while each of us are trying to find some sense in it all. I am proud to work with the Association of Arkansas Counties and the Arkansas Municipal League on this very important litigation. The time for change is now, and this is a step in the right direction to ensuring our communities get the resources they need to fight this epidemic. Thank you.
So that concludes our speakers, and we will be available for some questions and answers. I'd like to invite Jerome Tapley up here with me for this portion, and then Don Zimmerman back as well. Jerome is counsel on this litigation. He's with the Corey Watson Law Firm, and what we will do is be here to answer any questions that you might have. We do have two people holding microphones. If y'all raise your hand up high so everybody can see, we'll have two people roaming, and please use the microphones. I was at a Bon Jovi concert last night, and so my ears are ringing still. We welcome any questions. While we're waiting on questions, let me also see. Do I see Mike Rainwater out in the crowd? Mike, why don't you come over as well? Mike was really instrumental in beginning this process. So everyone, if you would, give Mike a big hand for his help on that. He really got this far.
Yes, thank you so much. Talk specifically about the lawsuit, the number of pharmaceutical companies you're going after, and what you're seeking, please.
There's 65 total defendants in the lawsuit. I've got a breakdown here. Let me find it. Of those 65 defendants, 52 are the manufacturers responsible for making opioids in this country and for selling those drugs. 3 of the defendants are distributors who represent over 95% of the opioids which are distributed in this country. 4 are retailers, 3 of those being local and 1 being an internet pharmacy. There is 1 clinic, 2 pharmacists, and 3 physicians, all of whom have been subject to adverse criminal action by state and federal officials. As far as what we're seeking a remedy for Arkansas. We're seeking a funding source that prevents the taxpayers from Arkansas from paying for this problem. I've got young daughters at home. I see a lot of y'all my age and older who probably have families of your own. We teach them as children to pick up your own mess because that's the law when we become adults. And this lawsuit seeks to make the people who are alleged to have caused the opioid problem in Arkansas clean up their own mess rather than have the taxpayers shoulder that burden.
I have a question. Not being shy. My concern is, I'm probably the only one here. I'm a school board member from Jacksonville. And whenever you mention the 12 to 17-year-old young people taking up painkillers, my concern is what is going to be made available to help the school districts out in Arkansas to help confront this situation. We have approximately 4,000 students in our school district, and we are a new school district. This is our second graduation year. And as a board member, and also from the Air Force, which I dealt with a lot of situations there, I'm really concerned about it. I know my fellow board members would be also.
I know I can speak for the counties and cities on this. They're working diligently to find ways to solve with the available resources the problem of Arkansas opioids. And I know I can speak for them on this. They'd like to work with you. They'd like to work cooperatively to find solutions on behalf of the schools. And they're there. They're passionate about it, and they're ready to go to work and use what resources are there now. Though they be scarce and they be few, and they're not close to enough. Hopefully, we succeed here and there is enough.
I'm kind of from a younger generation, and I kind of compare this to cigarettes. Does the cigarette lawsuit and the funding Arkansas currently receives from tobacco manufacturers act as a precedence in a lawsuit like this, and your hopes to get a win?
I think that the tobacco litigation is in some ways very similar to this in terms of how the industry is structured, but in some ways very dissimilar to this in terms of the effect on community. People didn't smoke a cigarette one afternoon and drop dead that night. This is very different in terms of the immediacy and the severity of the harm. Also, cigarettes and tobacco and the problem with that really fell on the shoulders of states on hospital costs, on treating cancer, on emphysema, on COPD, and the healthcare costs they're borne. This, as you can see from the people behind me and the people beside me, this is primarily a local problem. It's not a statewide problem. The people shouldering this burden are our communities, our local governments, our counties and cities. And so while there are similarities, there are differences that are very distinct and matter a lot. Thank you.
All right, we're not seeing any more questions. What I do want to do, especially with the press, I want to offer to you guys, and any of us will be available. We'll make ourselves available to visit with you at any point. I know you're going to be working on stories, and as well, the hundreds of people here today, city and county government, are the best resources for information. You all deal with it in your communities every day. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for the speakers, and have a great day.